We have to get these palms up. I want you to hold them up for a while. We need to celebrate. Thank you for bringing these palms in again. For years and years they're here. So, did you know, as we hold these up, it is a righteous thing to hold these palms up today. I mean, the Psalms, they're talking about the palms, and when they say that you still have sin, they still say when you hold these palms up, especially on this day, that is a righteous thing to do. Amen?
Are you going to take a picture?
It shows.
Are you going to take a photo?
Do I?
Are you going to take a photo? Okay, because I only have video.
I can take photos later on. Any other questions?
I'm an autograph.
My favorite song. Okay. Well, when we wave these songs, it is a reminder of that special day when Jesus did come through the gates into Jerusalem, and everyone then erupted. And so it is good for us to wave the palms on this day. At the time of Passover then, Jerusalem, it was crowded with visitors. I mean, every Jewish adult, man or woman, in a radius of 20 miles had to be there. I mean, it was an obligation to be there for this celebration. Not to mention that many more people came from a lot farther than that just because it was so important to them that they just chose to be there. Now, these days, they believe there were as many as 2 million to 2.5 million people that came into Jerusalem for this celebration. Now, it's a big city. I mean, some of you know I've been to Jerusalem, but it's not that big. I mean, you can imagine the streets made of stone, and they're narrow, and they curve, and they wind around 2 million people. The dust that stirred up. But that didn't slow the people down from coming to Passover. I mean, this was a commemoration event that had taken place for 1,500 years when God delivered people from the land of slavery into the promised land. The triumphal entry. And it is called the Passion Sunday that follows this week. And it was such a big deal that all 4 Gospels write about it. I mean, they give the significance of the occasion, and that's unusual because we'll often find that not all 4 Gospels will report on the same thing. Jesus, the Passover Lamb, he heads to Jerusalem and initiates a massive public demonstration as he offers himself to be king of Israel. Now keep in mind, Jesus was normally pretty quiet. I mean, he would quietly do his miracles, and he would heal somebody, and he would say, no, don't tell anybody. Remember the time he went up to the mountain, and Elijah was there, and Moses was there, and some of the disciples were with him. And once they walked back down the mountain, he says, no, don't tell anybody. He wasn't really one to make a big show most of the time. And they didn't tell anybody until after the resurrection, after the death and resurrection. So, now he sets this crusade of a sort into motion, and it's huge. And it probably was set so the Jews would never be able to say, if only I had the time or the understanding to embrace you as our king. We certainly would have done so if we had known. He kind of stripped that excuse away from the Jewish nation as he rode into Jerusalem and publicly offered himself as their Messiah. And he already had made it clear that his calling was to be the king, which had nothing to do with money or control, power over people, land. Earlier in the scripture, all the signs point to Jesus as the King of glory. As the king comes in peace. This king is celebrated by the people in the kingdom and is crowned with praise. In other words, welcome to the inauguration of the Prince of Peace and the King of Kings. As Jesus starts to enter the gates of Jerusalem, there's a climax from the crowd. There's a whole lot of people that have been looking forward to the day when something like this would happen. I mean, ever since the disciples had identified him as Christ, the Son of the living God, he had told them that I must go to Jerusalem, and on one of those journeys, it's going to be special. It won't be like any of my other journeys to Jerusalem, and this is the one. Because he arrived there at this time. I bet we aren't the first ones to say, that's no coincidence. That's a God thing. This is happening for a reason. And while the whole crowd, they don't really fully understand the story yet, Jesus knows the event. And he knows that this is a foreshadow of his own death. The Passover Lamb is about to take on a whole new and a much deeper meaning. Yet with the sorrow that Jesus experienced later, he's still able to live in full joy on this day, in this moment. And he replies to the Pharisees, who are, of course, the naysayers. And they're trying to get him to quiet down. He says, I tell you, if they tried to stay quiet, meaning all of the crowds, the stones will cry out. Now, I remembered this story as a kid, when I'd listened to it in church and in the Sunday school classes. And I always thought, I was confused, because I thought, how could Jesus have such joy knowing he's coming close to his death? The crucifixion's almost here. I mean, he knew something was coming in the sorrow of tomorrow. Good Friday's coming soon, yet he could live in a total joy in today. I know people who can't do that even when their future's looking fine.
Praise the Lord.
Everything's going fine. They can't live in today. They worry about tomorrow. I mean, they can't stop to enjoy this day because it seems that they have to be afraid of what might happen. Or sometimes there's a pending concern. Or sometimes we're waiting for a frightening diagnosis. Or they constantly worry every day. And I'm not saying all of it, that there's no excuse for it. I mean, there's real worry. Sometimes it's like the taxes on the house and everything just keep going up, but the income stays the same. But Jesus, he's humble. In spite of the changes, though, it's changes in the taxes, it's that we can miss so many joys in our life. And we can simply think of or be concerned about the pain of the future that might not even come along, that the sunlight blocks, that we're blocked from the sunlight with dark clouds. Or if we let darkness block God's holy sun in our lives. It's so easy to forget that this is the day that God has made, and let us rejoice in that. Jesus thinks of life in ways that far surpass earthly standards.
That's right.
I mean, we kind of worry about, well, am I going to get to 70 years old? Or 80 years old? Or 90 years old? Or 100 years old?
Well,
Yet Jesus asks, do you want life ever after? Everlasting?
yeah.
I mean, it's off the scale from the way we even think. We'll get back to that. You see, Jesus is humble, yet he seems to always surprise us with holy results. When the Messiah is he's referred to as the King, it seems strange because of this lowly entrance that he makes. He doesn't seem like a king to some people. I mean, the rulers usually came in as conquerors, riding in these prancing horses that were very powerful. Jesus enters on this lowly beast, not on a black horse that's a symbol of power, but a brown colt. But don't get me wrong, he's not entering without power. He entered with a higher power that required no boasting at all. He was not interested in a revolutionary political win. He entered as the Prince of Peace. He's a peaceful king of God who came for his people.
Thank you, Lord.
And Matthew announces in 4 and 5 that this fulfilled the prophecy that was written. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, Gentile, mounted on a donkey. This is also referring to Zechariah 9:9 and Isaiah 62:11. They both foretold of the coming of this king who will be here in a special way. Not as a fierce warrior, but riding a donkey. That would be the symbol for peace. Jesus is not only proclaiming himself as the Messiah, but he's also proclaiming that the scriptures are being fulfilled. But he also demonstrated that he did not come to conquer by imposing his will over other nations. It must have looked awkward with this humble creature on such a grand day, but it almost seems like the message is over the top obvious. I mean, it's not supposed to be beyond our understanding. It's supposed to stand out. It's supposed to be obvious. It's like he's shouting out, is anyone there? Does anyone not notice the message? On Thursday this week, I was out at Seattle University and I was watching a video, and it was about a pastor who was doing a sermon. She was at a very prestigious cathedral. It's at Duke Cathedral. The sanctuary was beautiful. I mean, it had that real high architecture, the ceilings, pillars that go way up, looked like those European churches. And then when you saw the place from her point of view, as she looked out at the people, there were all these gold statues on the sides. And then I look around here at Grace. I look at our sanctuary. Somehow, I think Jesus would be very pleased here. I think he might even be comfortable with us.
Yes, thank you, Lord.
And if someone were to give us a great wealth in this church, I'm not talking about $100,000. I'm saying if they gave us millions of dollars, I think Jesus would say, the people out there that needs that, the people out there that need you, go find them.
That's good.
I don't think he'd tell us to build some gold statues. Not at all. It doesn't fit. And did you notice that in verses 6 and 7, the obedience of the disciples, they did everything that Jesus told them to do. They got the donkey, and they took their clothes, and they took the tunics and blankets, anything they had to put over the donkey so he could go out into the crowd. And I'll quote, most of the crowd spread their coats in the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. Can you imagine? That's probably the only coat they had. Or if they only had two, I bet this was the nice one. They were going to see this triumphal entry of Jesus. I bet it was the nicest one they had. They put it down on the ground because it was better than some expensive carpet that someone might have done. Today, his disciples do the same thing. They follow Jesus just as he instructs them. And the illusion to preparing the cult for Jesus is what we do. It's what we are to do. When we look around and we say, we got to prepare the day that Jesus is coming. We talk about the 5-year plan. That's what it's all about. We got to prepare the day. Jesus didn't promise to release us from all the suffering in the world, but he did offer forgiveness, peace, eternal life, and a cross. Anything less than taking up the cross is serving him in a shallow allegiance. The crowds going ahead of him and following him, they were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And they started walking right alongside of him and behind him and walking in front of him. And they did no doubt look like a royal processional from the distance. You wouldn't really be able to tell the difference unless you saw the shiny swords of the other processional happening on the other side of town. The crowds were probably singing some of the psalms. In fact, we know they kept singing over and over Psalm 118, 25, and 26. I'm not going to repeat it, but if you want to write that down, Psalm 118, 25, and 26 is what they kept repeating. Take a look at that psalm and ask yourself, because at first it's puzzling, why would they keep singing that same thing? And while the crowd didn't fully understand the significance of this event, they seemed to be acknowledging that this is the promised one, the descendant of David. He's here. This is the one who does grant salvation. Jesus finally approached the ultimate destination in his trip from Galilee. And we can only wonder how many of those who cried Hosanna in the highest on Palm Sunday were crying out, crucify him. Crucify him on that Friday. I mean, some people must have been disappointed, resentful. I mean, Christ didn't overflow the Romans. He didn't take some earthly kingdom and change things around the way they expected. After all, he hadn't created a goal. He had missed his golden opportunity. He has the rally. He's coming into to Jerusalem, to the capital. There were people who were upset and angry. They were probably upset and angry because Jesus didn't resolve things the way they wanted it resolved. And it's true. Jesus wasn't following their plan. Just for a moment, let's reflect back on one comment made earlier. Jesus thinks in terms of life everlasting. A beautiful part of that is that Jesus invites you to also think in terms of not just how long we might live on earth, but to think in terms of life everlasting. That could be yours. And the answer to Jesus is Yes, Lord. I want to commit my life to follow you. I love you. I trust you. I want the living water that you offer. I will follow you to the cross. I will have joy with you on the morning of the Resurrection Sunday. Praise be and amen.
Good word, Pastor.
Thank you.